We got to hit our Xfinity fan questions as well. We were in Ann Arbor last week, and some Michigan fans weighed in. Let's take a listen to what our first question of the week is.
Hey, Eagle and Todd, who poses a bigger threat to the Wolverines? A road game against Penn State or a home game against the Buckeyes? Go Blue, beat Ohio.
Really delivered with good energy as well. So that first test is this week against Penn State. What do you think, Todd?
Well, I think Ohio State is a better team than Penn State, as was evidenced when they played a few weeks ago. However, playing Ohio State in Ann Arbor as opposed to playing Penn State in State College in Happy Valley in front of that 107,000 people, that's tough. And that's going to be a tough environment for Michigan. So I kind of see that as a toss-up. I mean, I'm not evading the question, but I think Ohio State's a better team, but you got them at home. Penn State's home field advantage is legit. And, Michigan went in there 2 years ago in 21 and won, but this is a better version, I think, of Penn State, particularly defensively, than they were 2 years ago.
It is. The one thing I will say, Penn State, the quote is that they're hopeful that Chop Robinson is going to play. I think that changes a lot. Chop Robinson is in there and he's healthy and he's what we know he's capable of being. That defense looks a lot different than without him. And Adisa Isaac is wonderful on the other side as an edge rusher, but Chop Robinson is special. And when you've got the two-headed monster, now you can't double team one of them because then you're going to give up too much real estate to the other one. I tend to go with Ohio State here. I just tend to think that their defense is so buttoned up right now. They've got all the pieces. You mentioned it. They need to be healthy, and they need to be healthy on both sides. And I think Cade Stover is probably the X factor there. If Cade Stover is healthy offensively, it changes a lot. And I think that's a big reason, to your point, that Marvin Harrison Jr. had only 25 yards last week because Ibuka was coming back, probably on a pitch count. And then you've got Cade Stover out there. G. Scott had a couple nice catches. He had a touchdown in his replacement. But Cade Stover has turned himself into one of the best tight ends in all of college football and a great third down option for Kyle Ford as a security blanket. So interesting stuff. We'll see the first of those two this week. Let's go to question number 2.
Hey guys, it's Jason from New Jersey. Just wondering if we end up losing to Ohio State. I know we had in the last 2 years, but if we lose this year, is there still any chance we make the playoff?
Jason from New Jersey, baby. Jason from New Jersey.
That, aren't you?
Yeah, it was an excellent question. Good question, though. Ohio State obviously lost to Michigan last year at the end of the year and still made the playoff. Do you think the Wolverines could do the same thing?
Well, I think it's certainly possible, right? I mean, in the same kind of scenario as what happened last year. The difference, though, and we talked about this in the very beginning, right now you've got the top 5 teams in the first CFP ranking that are still undefeated. And there are going to be some very interesting decisions that have to be made by potential one-loss conference champions. I mean, you could have a one-loss Oregon as the Pac-12 champion. You could have a one-loss potential Texas as a Big 12 champion. You could have a one-loss SEC champion in Alabama, and which would also mean a one-loss Georgia team potentially. So it's going to be very interesting. I think there'll be more competition for that one-loss team to make it in the college football playoff this year than there was a year ago.
And that's why my answer is probably no. I just think that there's too many good teams, unless chaos ensues these final 3 weeks, which is very possible. I just think when you look at the schedules and you look at the probabilities of how everything shakes out, what if Texas now runs the table? Now they're a one-loss team. You mentioned Washington. If they lose in the Pac-12 championship game, well, they've had some big wins, and especially even if they then went undefeated these last 3 weeks of the regular season, those are big wins. And I just don't know if Michigan's resume will stack up with that. But it's all big ifs, and we're going to get to see if they can do it this week. Then they get Maryland next week, which if Maryland gets back on a winning track, maybe they look at that game a little bit differently. And then, of course, the big one at the end of the year. So we'll all see what it looks like. But I just think that this year is tougher as a one-loss team, as a non-conference champion one-loss team than it had been maybe a year ago.
And I think the other thing that we didn't mention in all that is not just those one-loss. Let's say Washington stays undefeated, even though they got a tough road here the next 3 weeks, plays Oregon, and Oregon wins, and they're both sitting there with one loss, right? So not only do you have those scenarios, same thing in the SEC, you potentially are going to have an undefeated ACC champion Florida State who is also sitting there, So that's another spot at the table that really was not a factor last year. So it's going to be very difficult, I think, for any of those, conferences to get two teams in this year because of the way it's playing out.
Yeah, Ohio State doesn't get in a year ago if USC wins that Pac-12 championship. In all likelihood, USC was in prime position. They probably would have been in that top 4. They lose to Utah, and they fall completely out of it. And then, of course, it kind of goes off the rails into the bowl season. All right, we got one final question. Let's see what that is.
What's up, guys? I'm Dev from Connecticut. I'm just wondering, because it feels like every year Michigan makes the college football playoffs and does not win. What do they have to do to finally take home the title this year?
Out of how Dev from Connecticut putting on the helmet too. He's going all in for it. He got it looked like a Michigan basketball jersey as well. All right, so now we're back into the what ifs. If Michigan does run the table here, they go undefeated, they win the Big Ten again, they're 100% a shoo-in at that point to be in the college football playoff. I think that we kind of know the answer of what makes them different this year than what they had been the last 2 years. I think let's start with the first college football playoff appearance they had. They just weren't as good as the teams they had to go up against, really all other 3 teams. Last year they were. That was the difference. They were better than they were the year prior, and they just maybe underestimated TCU a little bit. J.J. McCarthy throws a couple of pick sixes in that game, and they got behind the 8 ball, almost come back to win it. That, to me, feels like the difference this year, right, is the quarterback play. What do you think of Michigan's chances, and I guess what do they need to do to kind of take that next step?
Yeah, I think 100% right. It's J.J. McCarthy and their passing game this year that is much better, much more efficient, much more explosive than it's been the last 2 years when they were in the college football playoff. In 21, Cade McNamara was the quarterback. They went up against Georgia, who eventually won the national championship, and they really posed no threat to the Georgia defense because they weren't good enough throwing the football. Last year against TCU, it was more a combination of some unusual mistakes. Michigan didn't make a lot of mistakes. 2 pick sixes thrown by J.J. McCarthy. He's a much better player this year, a much more efficient quarterback, much more better decision maker. He understands the offense, and he has played lights out since the Bowling Green game in week 3 when he threw 3 interceptions. All 3 of his interceptions came in that one game. So he's played at an extremely high level, and because of that, I think they have what it takes now to go into the college football playoff and win.